Well, welcome to the 2 o'clock session at the Luxury Lounge. We are so excited you're all here and a part of the audience today for a really exciting panel discussion. And I think this one's going to be a lot of fun. So before I introduce our incredible two speakers, I wanted to take a moment and introduce myself. My name is Caroline Danielson. I am the Director of Showrooms for Ferguson Home, which I hope that you all have seen throughout this show today. Our brand new logo is out and about and very proud. And we are so excited to be sponsoring the Luxury Lounge this year. If you don't know about Ferguson Home, that's okay. We just launched our new unified brand name today here at KBIS. And so we are so excited to partner with NKBA and all of our incredible vendors, customers, and community here to really launch this incredible unified brand. So those of you may know Ferguson Bath Kitchen and Lighting Gallery, and you also may know our incredible online digital platform, Build.com. Ferguson Home is a unified path to market for both Build.com on the digital side and Ferguson Bath Kitchen and Lighting Gallery, our incredible 250 showrooms across the country. So we encourage you to go and check out fergusonhome.com, see who we are, and really spend some time getting to know Ferguson Home. So without further ado, I am going to announce two incredible women who are going to come up and talk about selling in a sea of sameness. And I know that's something we can probably all relate to when everybody wants the same faucet, or the same color, the same light fixture. So we're so excited to have an incredible moderator in Kate Pearce. She's coming from us, and she's been an incredible partner for us at Ferguson, and we absolutely love her. And really excited because she and I do share a very similar interest in all things vintage and traditional. So I know you're going to have an exciting panel discussion with her. And then also our really good friend, Grace Haynes. She's the senior home and garden editor for Veranda. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce these incredible ladies to come up, and hope you have a wonderful session.
Hey everybody, thank you for being here today. Thank you, Caroline, and thank you to Ferguson Home for the opportunity to share our afternoon together. Like Caroline said, I'm the senior home and garden editor at Veranda magazine. We like to say that we are both for the trade and for the design enthusiasts. We really bridge that gap about really how to bring beautiful livability into our worlds through homes, gardens, travel. So subscribe. But I'm really excited to be here today with Kate. And Kate, would you please introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background, Kate Pearce Vintage, how you got there?
Sure. So I'm Kate Pearce of Kate Pearce Vintage. I am a content creator and interior designer. I got my start as a vintage shop. That's why my handle is Kate Pearce Vintage. And I was selling mostly on Etsy. I never had a brick and mortar. But I was styling all of the vintage pieces I was selling in my home. And it was Apartment Therapy. It was the first outlet to come along and say, hey, your home is really cool. Can we come do a feature on you and your home? And that's really was the beginning of growing an Instagram following for me. And I never set out to do what I'm doing today. I never really set out to be an interior designer or a content creator. My background's in art history. But it just kind of really organically came together. I'm now 7 years into this game, and it's been a journey that's always changing every year, which makes it really fun.
And what a way to bring personalization into our spaces through vintage pieces and just having a different perspective on how to make our homes totally our own and just really brimming with personality. And so I wanted to ask, buying old things, they're not for the faint of heart, you know. Whether it's a historic home, which you've done, or vintage furniture, fixtures, or accessories, it can take some serious work to rehab our old things. Why does this challenge appeal to you?
You know, I think it all started at a very young age for me. My mom would always take me to thrift stores and estate sales, and my dad was this huge history buff, and I think we were just talking about going to Williamsburg and Gettysburg and like all these places as a kid. I was just always into history. Which probably led me to academically pursuing a degree in art history. But I think even more than that, I just love bringing things back to life and giving them a second life. And there's nothing more fun than the vintage hunt also, right? Just
The thrill of the hunt.
the thrill
There's
of
nothing
the
better.
hunt. It's just, there's nothing better. It's like I really get my endorphins running with looking for vintage hunting. But it really wasn't until we bought our first home that was a historic home, and it needed so much work. We had no budget, and we had no choice but to kind of go to the thrift store and find pieces that could work and just use our own labor and our own creativity to bring that home back to life. And I think as a homeowner, that was really when I fell very deeply in love with vintage and antiques and historic homes. And we're 3 historic homes in now. We love renovating them so much that we just go from home to home to home, and we buy them as fixer-uppers, and we live in them as we renovate them. We do most of our work on our own. And that's the basis of my content creation on social media, is showing how I renovate these old homes.
Can you tell us about your latest historic home, an 1899 home in Chicago, correct?
Yes. This is a really special home. We moved from New York 3 years ago. I had never lived in the Midwest. I really didn't know where I wanted to live, but we're just north of Chicago in Evanston, which is this area that just has all historic homes. And they're all architecturally so different and interesting. But we were looking in the city, to the west of the city, north, everywhere, and I just fell so deeply in love with this home. It's a Queen Anne in 1899. It needed so much work. Like, I still don't really have functioning bathrooms. It's always a journey renovating these old homes. As you said, it's not for the faint of heart, and it really is. You only do it if you love it, and it is
a true labor
have
of love.
a true passion for it. Yeah.
And so, being able to really start from scratch, coming in, totally renovating. I think being at the show this morning, just seeing so many ways how you can customize your space. And bring personality in through color, fixtures, finishes to totally make it your own. And so I was hoping that you could kind of walk us through your kitchen renovation and what your vision was, what you started with, and then how it came to life from there.
Sure. The thing that I love most about fixer-uppers is you don't feel guilty about gutting them. And we gutted a few rooms to make space for our kitchen. So I was really starting from scratch, and I could really make it and tailor it into what I wanted it to be. I say I do have a partner. He just isn't allowed to have opinions, really. But it was really about making a space that was practical and functional and personal. That was huge, but something that would really last. I wanted a kitchen that in 15, 20 years, I would still be happy that that was my kitchen. So
it'll be the next one that we're trying to preserve. The longevity.
Yeah, hopefully. So that was really the trickiest part, was making something. I like bold designs. I do love trends, but it was about finding that perfect balance between trendiness and color, and really something that was going to stand the test of time, and striking that perfect balance.
So how do you approach color in a kitchen? Because these are such utilitarian spaces. I think the hardest working spaces in our home. So there's a line of how to go bold, but you're using this every day. So what is your approach to that?
Sure. I like to bring color in ways that are maybe slightly less permanent. In this kitchen, it's probably the opposite. I went bold on my cabinet color, bold on my stone. But the stone, it just reads as very classic still.
Could you tell us a little color palettes that you...
Sure. So I have, it's called Palazzo Rose is the marble in my kitchen, and it's pink. It has pink veins. It's very bold. But I still think it's a little bit like a Calicata Viola. I think it's something that will really stand the test of time. I think bold marbles are something I'm excited are back in style, but
yes.
I think historically they've really been in style for most of history. Like, you go back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome and you see bold marbles. So I think people are just kind of recognizing again how classic really they are. And then with cabinetry, not that anyone has to want to paint their cabinets again, but that's a possibility. If you have some really great quality cabinetry, just repainting maybe 10 years down the road if you're getting tired of the color or the color feels dated. I just like to bring color in ways that, the exception of my stone, that can be changed out without having to do a complete kitchen renovation again.
Right. One thing that is also really interesting in your kitchen is your mix of lighting. And so it's really an ambient space. And so could you talk a little bit about how you mix overhead lighting, even lamps, just to really bring that coziness of a living room into these homes that we spend so much time in?
Sure. I mean, I think as you're saying, we spend so much time in our kitchens, and they're really utilitarian spaces that need to function as kitchens. So you need to have your task lighting that isn't always the most beautiful lighting. And then if you're entertaining and hosting a lot, you want to make sure that maybe you can make that switch from the time you were cooking and prepping everything to when you're going to be entertaining. Mm-hmm. And I think it was really important to me to have both of those types of lighting in the space. So there was a lot of argument. I spoke about my husband who exists but has no opinions. He actually had very strong opinions about putting can lighting in the ceiling, and we went back and forth about that. I wasn't thrilled about it, but we argue about it every day still, actually. Like, he walks downstairs, he puts on all the overhead lighting. I'm like, this is all wrong. Like, you don't need that. No, please. It's a daily argument, but I understand its purpose, its function, and he wants his bright light, like he's operating on someone in our kitchen, I guess. But
I'm team no overhead lighting.
Right? I let him have it. I let him have, because it can always go off. That was the
true.
selling
Very
point.
true.
It can always be turned off, but having the option of having it on is always a plus, right? But I also like, this is also kind of a trend. It isn't anything I invented, but table lamps. Yes. Entering the kitchen space, I think, really adds this comfort factor that is just so nice, especially for having guests or just at night when we turn the overhead lighting off and I have my sconce lighting on and just the table lamp. And it's just, I think, really at the heart of what I'm saying is you want to have options. You want to be able to create different moods and be able to have different functions based on your lighting. And I think not just for kitchens, I think lighting is one of the most important aspects of design, truly.
Because these rooms do function in so many different ways of, cooking, and you need your task lighting, but then drinking coffee. I mean, since the pandemic, there are home offices, homework hubs. So really, it's just hanging out and entertaining.
Yes.
You need those options.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so talking about how kitchens, we live in these spaces so much, what other elements and furniture are you bringing in to make them so livable? Like if you're cooking and maybe your family is sitting around hanging out with you, so you're not alone in there. So any other seating options to make it really more of a living space?
Absolutely. I mean, we really truly spend probably 90% of our time as a family, and 90% of the time we're entertaining. I had a friend come over recently and she was like, we never leave your kitchen, do we? Like every time we come over here, we're just sitting in your kitchen. Yeah, I'm like, well. But, we have different seating. We're lucky that we have a fairly decent sized kitchen. So we have a breakfast nook that has an upholstered banquette that has some comfortable seating. And then we have counter seating, which it was important to me to have be beautiful, but also comfortable so people can sit at the counter while you're cooking or whatever, and just actually be comfortable. And then we actually have a tiny sunroom off of our kitchen, which we took the doors off of and put some really comfortable chairs in so that you can really be comfortable. If you're drinking wine or having coffee, like you can still be talking to whoever is preparing food in the kitchen. So, not every kitchen allows for that amount of seating, but if it's an option, I think it's a nice thing to consider because we all do spend so much time in our kitchens.
Yeah. The versatility there.
Exactly.
Really
Exactly.
makes the most of the space. So looking around, are there any certain kitchen trends you're really excited about?
Very excited about the bold stones making a comeback. I've always, my entire life, just anytime I've seen a beautiful marble stone, I've always drooled over it. And I have people all the time walk in my kitchen say, okay, you've had this stone for 2 years now. Are you sick of it yet? I'm like, not at all.
That's a
Not
good
at all.
question, because I think people will talk themselves out of maybe going for a bolder stone, thinking that, oh, I'm going to get tired of this. But
Yes, it's maybe the number one question I'm asked is like, are you sick of your stone yet? I'm like, never. I will never be sick of this stone. Actually, our last kitchen renovation in the last home we renovated, I didn't do, the stone was fairly bold still, but it was a quartz, and that was really important to me to just, I didn't love it. I really didn't love it. And I was like, I just want to love my counters and my stone, and I don't want to feel like I'm itching to replace them after 5 years. I just want to pick a really beautiful, unique stone and be happy with it for, that can last, it can last forever.
Yes.
And marbles are also, these days, like, they're able to seal them in such a way. Like, I don't have a single stain or scratch 2 years in on my marbles. Another thing people are always very concerned about with
yes, yeah,
softer stones.
That's a good thing to know.
Yeah.
Going back to your love of vintage and antiques, me personally love vintage and antiques, but I'll walk into a thrift store and I'm so intimidated. I get overwhelmed and I think maybe this could be something, maybe not. So how do you approach going into a thrift store and really spotting those diamonds in the rough?
Sure. I think it's something that just comes with time. I think one thing from when I was first really going to thrift stores and estate sales, we didn't have smartphones that we could just look up what we're looking at. And I think that's a real advantage for people walking through a thrift store or an estate sale or a flea market, is you can just pick it up, look for markings and just see really what its worth is. I'd say you have to be careful what your resources or your sources for finding its worth, because an eBay price is not necessarily what your piece is worth. But I think people do have a pretty good sense for quality. And you can just see it doesn't have to be worth something. Some of my favorite pieces in my home, they're priceless to me, but they're not worth, and if I were to go resell them, they wouldn't necessarily be fetching a super high price.
Right. It's all about the beholder.
Just loving it. Yeah.
So what is an example of one of those things that you found that is so priceless to you?
That's hard. There's so many.
Probably so many.
Yeah, there's so many things. But I think really the other thing I would say is people say, oh, how do you find all these things? I go to the thrift store sometimes and I never find anything. I'm like, well, that's your problem. You're going sometimes. You have to go all the time. And with estate sales, like I would go to 5 estate sales every weekend when I was a dealer, when I was reselling. So that's died down a bit. But I still have a lot of those pieces from my dealing days, because I'd be out looking for pieces to resell, really keeping my eye on what was going to be valuable for resale, and then picking up these pieces that I just personally loved for my own home. So having storage is also hugely important if you're going to be serious about your vintage and antique hunt, because you just need to grab those pieces when you see them. And even if you don't have the place for them now, if you have interior design clients especially, like, get a storage unit and just kind of hoard these pieces, because you'll find a place for them. And they really just it's vintage and antique are really what make a place, in my opinion. It just gives a space its soul.
They bring that soul and that personalization to really tell the story of the people that live there.
Exactly.
What makes all of our homes special to us.
Yeah.
Okay, so where do you draw the line, though? What is something that you would always buy vintage and something that you would stray away from?
So I think there's really, if we're not talking about like clothing and underwear, it's like just in the interior design, there's really like nothing I would not consider buying vintage. Like in every bathroom I've ever renovated, I have found an antique or mid-century dresser and I've repurposed it to be the sink console. I don't think I've ever bought a new console for a bathroom. My kitchen island is made out of a work table from...
That's one of my favorite elements about your kitchen, too.
Thank you. I love that piece, too. And, it took a while to find a piece of the right dimensions. That can be another thing if you're really serious about designing with vintage and antique. I would highly recommend finding your antique and vintage pieces first and then designing your space around them, especially in a space like a kitchen or a bathroom where a lot of your elements are going to be customized anyway. Like you're getting custom cabinetry that you can customize around those vintage or antique elements. It's much easier than making your kitchen design and then trying to find the right dimensions and the right antique or vintage pieces to stick into those spaces.
Right. So would you ever reveal some of your sources online that maybe more people can shop at? But
Absolutely.
or local too.
Yeah. No, I often reveal my sources. I'm not a gatekeeper. A lot of my content on social media is exactly that, is sharing my sources. But, I know this is a source that everyone knows probably, but Facebook Marketplace has become one of my very favorite ways to source vintage and antiques. And, a lot of people will be asking for a lot of money. So one tip I would have is, if you're looking for something that might be valuable on Facebook Marketplace, don't search, like if you're looking for a Vladimir Kagan sofa, don't put Vladimir Kagan in there. Just be like, oh, kidney-shaped sofa. Because what you're really trying to do is find the people who don't know what they have. You're trying to take advantage of them not having any idea what they have there. So that's one tip. But I do... I love that there's been so many more online sources recently. Like when I was first starting out, I would have to show face at estate sales and at thrift stores. But now you can do so much of it from the comfort of your home. And even places that seem super high end or like out of my price bracket, like Cherish often, you can negotiate those prices. And if you search deeply enough, even like my kitchen counter, I had shipped all the way from France. I was too cheap to pay for the expedited shipping, so I had to wait 17 weeks for it to arrive.
That's patience.
So sometimes it takes patience, but the shipping was so inexpensive. The piece was so much cheaper than anything I could find in the Chicago area, and overall, it's really like the most special piece in my kitchen.
Yeah. For your clients, what's something that you're seeing them ask for more and more?
I think definitely color. Like people come to me for color. They definitely come to me for vintage and antique, which can be slightly frustrating because they're like, oh, but you only paid $100 for that. Like, can you find that for me for $100? Like, no, that's not really how that works. Like, if you want to go find it for yourself for $100. So that can be a little frustrating as people don't understand how much work goes into sourcing vintage and antiques. Like, to find that kitchen counter, I probably spent 35 hours just doing searches on Facebook Marketplace, searches on Cherish first, like until I found the right piece, the right dimensions, at the right price. Because I'm never willing to pay a lot of money for anything. So it's not even about finding the piece; it's about finding it for a great price as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone has any questions for Kate, we would love to open up the floor.
Yeah.
Hi, Kate.
Hi.
Great job. I came in a few minutes late, so I apologize if you already answered this, but as a designer, I tend to typically source new. Probably a lot of it is, like you said, the time, trying to find the right piece, and I don't always feel like I have the luxury of the time, especially with my clients. So for someone who's not great at antiquing, and admittedly I will say I am not great at it, what are the key things that you're looking for? Because I could find a piece and I think it's amazing, and then I look at it and I realize it's like trash, not worth anything. So how can you tell when something's valuable?
I think that is a knowledge base that just comes with time. When I was first starting out, I had no idea what I was picking up, really. My background is in art history. So as far as anything that would be art related, the first purchase I made for my vintage store was a Fernand Léger ceramic plate. And I just happened to know what it was because he's an artist primarily, and I bought it for $2 at an estate sale. I was able to resell it for almost $900. So that was the first purchase that started my whole business. Like I tell people I started my entire business with $50 in my bank account, and it is true. And, I took that $850 and I just kept reinvesting it in pieces but I learned along the way. And then just with so much experience behind my belt of years of selling, you realize what will sell, what won't, to what market will it sell, where it won't. And also another thing to keep in mind is if you are not a dealer yourself, the chances of you getting your money back on a piece, what are your options for resale? Facebook Marketplace, nobody is going to pay you top price. You're not a sought after first dibs dealer. So I always encourage people who are not in the vintage and antique game to just buy what you love. Like, you can tell what's quality when you're in a store. Like, is it made of MDF board or is it tiger wood, and pick up those pieces that just speak to you, and don't worry so much about the actual value of it, because especially now, I think thrift and vintage are very popular right now, and prices are kind of soaring because of it. So I think it's becoming a harder and harder game to actually make a profit on.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah.
Thanks. I also source Facebook Marketplace sometimes, and mostly for my own projects.
Yeah.
How do you, if you're working for a client, how do you prepare them for the unknown that goes along with sourcing something vintage, especially when you're not buying it at a vintage shop, so you're not seeing it in person?
Sure. So I tend to source newer pieces for most of my clients for this reason. Whenever I even bring up the prospect of Facebook Marketplace finds for them, like, they never seem very interested in it, and it's so much more work for me as well. And, there's really no profit to be made there for me if I'm going to pick something up for $50.
Well, that was my second part of the
Exactly.
question was, are you able to make any money? Because often I'll be like, you could get that for $100, or I could sell you a new one for like $4,000.
Right. And they don't tend to appreciate the value that's there anyway. So with my clients, I actually source very little vintage, and it will usually be like either in person with them or from like a very reputable dealer like Cherish, who will ship to their home, because they don't want to be bothered with. A lot of my clients are not local to me either. So I'll be like, I'm willing to do a local Facebook Marketplace search for you, but I can't be the one going to pick it up. And they don't want to be bothered.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi. So you said you used a lot of vintage pieces, like for bathroom vanities. Can you talk a little bit about what modifications you might need to make for plumbing, for different heights, for countertops, etc.?
Sure. So that is obviously something you're always going to have to keep in mind. I mean, for bathroom consoles, you're always going to have to add the plumbing into the back. So sometimes that means reconfiguring drawers, like we'll cut drawers out, make them a little smaller for plumbing. So that can really cut into your storage space too, depending on the piece. But it's really, that's another thing I would say too, is like, because the dimensions have to be so specific often for especially a bathroom space, I tend to not be able to source those pieces on Facebook Marketplace. Those tend to be more on Cherish or First Dibs or some kind of search engine where I can more easily input the exact dimensions, and then it will just show me which pieces will meet those dimensions. But it's absolutely possible. I know a lot of people are always telling me like, oh, my contractor doesn't want to cut into that piece or doesn't know how to add the plumbing to that piece. It's really not hard though. You just have to cut through the back of it and add a little notch out for the plumbing.
Anyone else? Well, thank you all so much for being here, and thank you, Ferguson Home, for hosting us today. It was such a pleasure to speak with you, Kate,
Yeah, you
and I
too,
got so
Grace.
much out of it, so I can't wait to take this back to my own home. But thank you all so much, and I hope you all have a great rest of your show.